So, Anne, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was a really powerful discussion, lot to unpack, but I wanted to just get your biggest takeaway from what you heard tonight from the teachers and school staff.
Yeah, I mean, it was wonderful. I always love talking to teachers and hearing from teachers. We don't hear from them enough. And I really felt highly impressed by how many teachers are feeling that this year of teaching is more difficult and more exhausting than the last two, right? We're 24 months into the pandemic, and we all lived and worked through that first spring of uncertainty and a sudden switch to virtual. And then we all lived through very different experiences last year, depending on what part of the country we're in and how our districts handled it, in terms of how we taught, whether it was virtual, hybrid, or full in person, or some combination, as many teachers did. And that was an incredibly difficult year. I taught through that year and really white knuckled it myself. And yet, to talk to teachers who are teaching this year in now year 3, and to get a really profound sense of their exhaustion and their, I wouldn't even say frustration, I would just say their exhaustion. There are frustrations there. The primary one being is that they want to be the best teacher that they can be, and they know that they can't in this moment. But I think my biggest takeaway was just how exhausted teachers are, and how difficult this year has been, despite certain advancements, the vaccines being available, all those things that we looked forward to as the light at the end of the tunnel. But they were a guide point along the tunnel, but they weren't the end of the tunnel. And I think that that's really having a profound effect on teachers and students, obviously, from what they were saying tonight.
I agree. And I have a similar takeaway. I mean, I'm still in the classroom, my 20th year. And I agree. For me, I feel like, unless you're ignoring that it's a pandemic, I feel like our nation, our world is in mourning for what we've lost a lot. And I'm not talking about learning loss. I'm talking about just what we have lost as a society. Just that we talk about the water cooler talks that you used to have, and those casual connections you have that are gone because of the pandemic. And I feel a sense of mourning for what school used to be for my first 18 years of teaching. And then the past 2 years, so different. But I felt a sense of mourning in that group tonight about just their experience now versus what they loved about the profession. And that was a room full of people who still love their jobs so much that they're sad and in mourning that they can't do what they used to do with those same lessons and that same material. So I have hope, because I see how passionate educators are. I know how passionate I still am, even though I'm sad about what we've lost. So I try not to be toxically positive, but I do try to look for some signs of life. But yeah, last year we were still on the, how do we fix this? How do we solve this? Like, what ventilation systems can we kind of rig together for the classroom? And now the sense is a little more dystopian. Like, yeah, we're all probably going to get COVID, and there's really no way to make this classroom safe. And let's just get through the year. And that's sad.
I will say, as much as teachers expressed their exhaustion and their frustrations, and their feeling that this has just gone on too long, teaching suboptimally, I did feel, at least for myself, uplift from hearing those other voices, and the notion that you're not alone. As you said, if we're not necessarily eating in faculty rooms together for lunch, if some of our meetings are still virtual, if we're not getting together after school because people are, living through now another wave where we're safer if we're not creating additional opportunities for spread, that it is lonely, and we can forget that there are other teachers out there who are having the same experiences that we are having, and just sharing that is so helpful. As far as the toxic positivity goes, right, we always want a solution, and teachers in particular are problem solvers, right? So we want to solve our problems for ourselves and each other, and we feel a little helpless right now. But if we can create more ways like this, I think having this Zoom conversation that the NewsHour has provided is incredibly valuable. And it's a time probably where more of this has to happen between teachers, even within their own schools. Nobody feels like they want to spend more time on Zoom, but this was the best time I've spent on Zoom in a long time, because you're sharing, again, both the troubles and getting at some ways that we can make our lives a little bit better, the ways that we can improve our relationships with our students, and also trying to just have some solidarity among those three big groups that are struggling the most right now: the teachers, the students, and the parents.
So you bring up parents, which I think is really important, because I will also say a year ago, I don't think the friction was as strong as it seemed to be portrayed in the media and continues to be portrayed. But I really enjoyed what you were talking about in terms of the importance of teachers and parents finding common ground and talking to one another, especially around the multiple, I guess you could say, challenges that teachers, educators are facing around COVID safety. You could bring in gun safety, gun violence safety, and also these divisive issues laws that are coming down the pipeline in my opinion, too many states, but others might disagree. Can you speak a little about that, the importance of teachers and parents finding common ground and working together right now?
Absolutely. I think that the media narrative is about the tensions between parents and teachers that exist to different degrees in different places over different issues. I think the narrative is not just about describing those tensions, but there are political actors out there who would like to exacerbate those tensions and to broaden them. But what we've seen through up till today is that there is a tremendous amount of common ground that parents have with teachers, and that public opinion about teachers is not the dire forecast that we're seeing from some in the media. And it makes it that much more important that on an individual level as teachers and as groups of teachers, we seek to have more conversation with parents. One of the narratives that's going on right now is that schools aren't transparent, and there are political actors who are pushing for school transparency. But most parents know we're highly transparent. Schools have never been more transparent than they are now, with all the electronic information that's available to parents about what their student is doing in school and how their student is doing in school. And I think we can supplement that by the good old-fashioned phone call, the good old-fashioned email to parents to check in with them about their individual child, and to make sure that they know that we're still here. And as hard as it is, and as much of a workload as teachers have right now, having that conversation and maintaining those relationships is more important than ever. Because what's going on is not just affecting teachers and parents, it's affecting the students that are their mutual interest. And being a constant reminder of that is a valuable thing.
That's such a good point, because it is crazy actually to me when I hear all that narrative that teachers need to be more transparent. And I think to myself, every single one of my students parents can join my Google Classroom, where every single lesson, every single PowerPoint, every single rubric for the assessment is up there. Where versus 20 years ago when I first started teaching, we weren't, I think I didn't even have I didn't have a computer in my office, let alone my classroom. So we couldn't do anything digital. So I do think it's important that you're right. I think a phone call goes a long way to remind teachers that remind parents that whatever they're hearing on the news at night or reading on Twitter is not happening in real life. It is more of a political story, a political agenda. It's super important. And I also loved what you said tonight about just always reminding people that I think teachers, just it goes without saying that everything we do is for the students we teach, every single thing. And there is a narrative too that teachers are selfish and just love being in a union so they could work less hours. And I would love for those people to sit in the Zooms to hear how much teachers are working now, especially now during the pandemic. But I think you're right that teachers need to spell it out more and remind people how everything we do, even minding our own mental health, is for the kids in our classrooms so they can have the best damn learning experience they deserve, right?
Absolutely. And
So
when teachers are expressing their concerns, they're not just complaining about their work conditions. They are expressing their concerns about the health of the school system as a whole, about the academic and mental health of their students, and not just about what's going on in their work world. Because our work world is, as you mentioned, is our students.
my next question has to do with your book Schooled.
Mhm.
And just for the very few people who haven't read it yet, tell us what inspired you to write it and what's changed since you wrote that. Like if you were to write Schooled Part 2, which I'd love, what would that look like versus what Schooled is about?
Sure. Yeah. So Schooled was a book that had its genesis in 2012, when there was a wave of legislation going through the states around teacher accountability. We had seen a huge uptick in the number of standardized tests that students were taking. We were now having teachers undergo a whole host of their own tests and evaluations that were all designed in theory to improve school systems. And so my sister, who's an anthropologist, Catherine Lutz, and I traveled the country to meet with teachers to find out what all of those reform efforts were doing in terms of their teaching and their lives as teachers. And we learned a great deal about what teachers were facing in common. Some of the common struggles, again, around accountability, around testing, around issues at that point of austerity, because school budgets had been cut during the recession and had not been rebuilt. They still haven't been rebuilt in a number of states. And so we heard from teachers some of the same things, but also some very different things, because teachers work in a wide range of settings across the nation, depending on where they teach, what type of school they teach in, what level they teach, what subject they teach, what type of community they teach in. And that's one of my big takeaways from the book that I always try to keep in mind, is that while there's a lot that's going on at the national level that's affecting teaching and learning, each teacher in each school in each district is having a different experience. And so we have to be careful when we talk about teachers are experiencing X or schools are like Y. It is hyperlocal. And that's true right now as well during COVID. We've all had very different experiences in terms of the virus and how it spread and the impact that it's had. We've also had very different experiences in terms of dealing with some of the political actions, the legislative actions that are making it more difficult right now for history and English teachers to teach what they know is good teaching. And so that's, I would say, probably the biggest takeaway that I try to hold on to is just what a big varied experience teachers are having across these very large and diverse United States. Sari Beth, this is my first time on the NewsHour Classroom Zoom. So I wanted to ask you, if there was something different or new that you were hearing this time than you've heard in the past.
Yes. So we had a Zoom with Jose Vilson back in May, and he had a couple concerns, but his biggest concern was that there was going to be a big push to return to normal when normal wasn't working before the pandemic. And I agreed. I said, this is a great opportunity. And I'm sure you and also agree that this was a great opportunity to really look at what was working and not working, and not do the stuff that wasn't working anymore. And what I sensed in this Zoom was just a palpable tension and discomfort from teachers, because last year we were all acknowledging that this wasn't normal, and there was some hope that it wasn't, that things weren't normal before. They're especially not normal now. And there was a bit of hope that this could be a time to really change what we were doing in schools, school systems, etc. And this time, checking in several months later, what I'm sensing in my own experience and other teachers across the country in that Zoom is that there has been a big push to just return to the old ways. And what's happening now across the country, it feels, from the teachers that we spoke with, is that there's this big attempt to impose that system that was not working before back into schools, back into situations where, first of all, kids are not okay. They need a lot of different supports that the old normal system wasn't giving them and should have been giving them, and they need them even more now. Added to that is teachers need that as well. And it's not like they didn't need it before. We just kind of ignored that part of the teaching experience, the need for mental health services, because what we do is hard. And I got a sense tonight that teachers were beyond the point of frustration. It was almost like a sadness, because they were realizing that they're just trying to make us go back to normal now. They're, ramping up testing, and not COVID testing, but, standardized testing, and ramping up just the whole factory model system of the education system that we've had since the early 20th century. And during a time where there's still a pandemic, during a time where people have lost loved ones, during a time when kids are missing 10 days of school. And yeah, it was a much sadder tone. It was almost like people were too tired to be frustrated anymore. But there was also a sense for a need for community in a way that was stronger than I thought it could be, because last year there was a real desire for community. And tonight I felt it even stronger. It was more palpable. Yeah. I don't know if that makes sense.
And if one thing we can do for teacher mental health, which of course affects student mental health, is to connect with each other, despite all of the pressures and all of the disconnection that is out of our control. If we can consciously try to create some of those connections, that's one key thing that we can do.
I agree. And I do feel like teaching is the most social and lonely profession. That's how I like to describe it, because I am surrounded by people, human beings, teen human beings all day. Like there's no time alone. But I often don't see an adult all day unless it's a guidance counselor coming in or passing by in the hallway, or a dean. And it's a strange experience. And I definitely understand Gen Z culture more than most people because I'm around them all day. But sometimes I forget that, like, just the power of texting a coworker, like, today's really hard, isn't it? And then them simply writing back, yeah, it is. That goes a long way. And I think it's easy to isolate yourself because you're so busy all day. But sometimes I like to break out of the scene and do that. And it helps me for that minute to be like, all right, it's not just me. This is crazy what's happening, you know? And that's why I think these Zooms are so important. And I have to say that having you there was so helpful. And I hope we can do another one of these with you and kind of dig deeper into some of the topics we didn't get to discuss in the depth that we wanted to, because you are such a defender of teachers, an advocate for teachers, and they know that. And it's hard to find these days. And I'm not trying to do the whole like, oh, poor teachers, poor us, because I think teachers are the toughest people out there, but we take a beat. We've been taking a beating lately, both physically and, trying not to get Omicron, and also just like mentally in terms of how we're being portrayed in the media. And having someone like you on our side, someone who's been in the trenches with us, and then feeling, being able to speak out in a way because you're not in the classroom anymore. It's really helpful. So having that community and having you in it is really amazing.
Well, thank you so much for this opportunity, because yeah, teachers supporting teachers is essential. We don't all have time to do it. And now that's my full-time job.
Yay. Well, we're all the better for it.
All right. Thank you so much.